They called it the most peaceful mission in human history. A single medical frigate, the Hippocrates, carrying 12 doctors and nurses to provide humanitarian aid to a refugee crisis 3 systems away. No weapons, no military escort, just healing hands and hope in the darkness of space. The galaxy knew humans as builders and healers by then. 60 years after first contact, the species that had once warred among themselves had transformed into the unofficial medics of known space, their mobile hospitals welcomed on every civilized world. Earth's combat fleets had been mothballed, gathering dust in orbital graveyards. Their crews retrained as engineers and emergency responders, but the galaxy had forgotten something important about humanity. They had forgotten why those warships existed in the first place. They had forgotten that the same hands capable of gentle surgery could also rain destruction upon those who threatened the innocent. They had forgotten that doctors take an oath, not just to heal, but to do no harm, except to those who would harm others. The attack on the Hippocrates would remind them. And when the distress beacon finally reached Earth, broadcasting 18 minutes of pure horror across the void, the sleeping giants would wake. Because humanity's greatest strength was never their ability to build or heal. It was their absolute, uncompromising fury when someone hurt the people they had sworn to protect. The clinic ship incident would become legend, not for the mercy shown by the victims, but for the terrible, inevitable justice that followed. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the viewport of the Hippocrates, watching the blue-white star of the Kepler 442 system grow larger as they approached. The medical frigate hummed quietly around her, its corridors filled with the soft sounds of preparation. 12 souls aboard a ship designed for mercy, heading toward what intelligence reports called the worst refugee crisis in the Outer Rim territories. First time seeing a mass displacement event, Doc? Chief Medical Officer Marcus Webb joined her at the observation deck, his weathered hands carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee. At 68, Webb had seen more human suffering than most people could imagine, but his eyes still held the gentle determination that had made him legendary in the medical corps. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. At 32, she was the youngest doctor aboard, fresh from her residency at Lunar General. This assignment to the Hippocrates represented everything she had worked toward, a chance to bring healing to those who needed it most, far from the comfortable core worlds where medicine had become routine. The reports say over 2 million refugees from the Zelani system, Sarah murmured, reading from her tablet. Entire populations fleeing some kind of territorial dispute between the Korthak hegemony and the Vrex collective. They're calling it the worst humanitarian disaster in 50 years. Webb nodded grimly. Politicians and their wars. Always the civilians who pay the price. He sipped his coffee, staring out at the stars. But that's why we're here. That's why humanity built ships like this instead of more battle cruisers. We learned something the galaxy hasn't figured out yet. Sometimes the greatest victory is saving a life, not taking one. The Hippocrates represented the best of human medical technology. Her holds were crammed with surgical suites that could be deployed planetside within hours, bioprinters capable of manufacturing organs and prosthetics, and enough medical supplies to treat hundreds of thousands of patients. The ship herself was a testament to human engineering, efficient, elegant, and completely unarmed. Humanity had made that choice deliberately after first contact. When they discovered a galaxy filled with warring species, humans had taken a different path. Instead of building fleets to match their neighbors, they had become the medics, the engineers, the builders. It was a conscious decision by the United Earth Council, backed by popular support across all human colonies. Why add to the violence when they could be the healers? Captain's calling all senior staff to the bridge, announced Dr. Pierre. Lisa Torino, the ship's chief surgeon, as she emerged from the medical bay. Her dark hair was already pulled back in the practical style she favored during operations. We're receiving updated intelligence on the situation. The 3 doctors made their way to the bridge, where Captain Elena Rodriguez waited with the rest of the senior staff. Rodriguez was Career Medical Corps, a former trauma surgeon, who had transitioned to command specifically to lead humanitarian missions like this. The bridge of the Hippocrates reflected its peaceful mission. No weapons consoles, no tactical displays, just navigation, communications, and medical coordination stations. Ladies and gentlemen, Rodriguez began, her voice carrying the calm authority that had made her perfect for this assignment. We've just received an updated briefing from the Refugee Coordination Center at Kepler Station. The situation is worse than we initially thought. The main display showed a holographic representation of the Kepler 442 system. Several planets were highlighted in red, while a massive cloud of ships, refugee vessels of every conceivable design, crowded around the 4th planet. The fighting in the Zelani system has intensified, Rodriguez continued. Both the Korthak and the Vrex are claiming territorial rights, and civilian populations are caught in the middle. What started as 2 million refugees has become nearly 4 million in the past week. The local authorities are completely overwhelmed. Dr. Angela Morrison, the ship's chief xenobiologist, leaned forward. Captain, our medical supplies were calculated for 2 million beings. If the number has doubled, we make do, Webb interrupted firmly. We treat who we can, save who we can. That's the job. Rodriguez nodded. Doctor, Webb is correct. Our mission parameters remain the same. Provide medical assistance to refugee populations and coordinate with local authorities for mass casualty treatment. However, there is one complication. The display shifted, showing a new cluster of ships at the edge of the system. These vessels were different, sleek, predatory shapes that spoke of military purpose. Unknown vessels have been detected in the outer system, Rodriguez explained. They've been shadowing refugee convoys, but so far have made no aggressive moves. Local defense forces believe they might be pirates looking to prey on the displaced populations. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Pirates were a constant threat in the Outer Rim, but they rarely operated so boldly near inhabited systems. What kind of protection do we have? The standard for humanitarian missions, Rodriguez replied. None. The Hypocrites is a medical vessel operating under the Geneva Conventions of 2157. We're clearly marked as a hospital ship and protected under galactic law. Engineer Chief Tom Bradley, a grizzled veteran who had served on Earth's last battlecruiser before its decommissioning, shifted uncomfortably. Captain, with respect, pirates don't always honor galactic law. Wouldn't it be prudent to request an escort? Rodriguez's expression remained calm. Chief Bradley, the Hippocrates has operated in 43 crisis zones over the past decade without incident. Our neutrality is our protection. Besides, the nearest military vessels are 6 days away. We can't wait that long. People are dying. The briefing continued with technical details about refugee medical conditions, supply distribution protocols, and coordination with local authorities. But Sarah found her attention drifting to those unknown ships on the display. Something about them bothered her, though she couldn't quite identify what. After the briefing, Sarah made her way to the medical bay to conduct her final equipment checks. The bay was a marvel of efficiency. Modular surgical units that could be reconfigured for any species, diagnostic equipment that could identify medical conditions across hundreds of different alien biologies, and treatment protocols that had been refined through decades of humanitarian missions. Nervous? Asked Dr. James Park, the ship's trauma specialist, as he calibrated a bioscanner array. A little, Sarah admitted. This is my first major deployment. I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Park smiled. That's good. Means you care. But remember, we're trained for this. Every person on this ship is here because they're the best at what they do. We've got protocols for everything, and if something comes up we haven't seen before, we improvise. That's what humans do. The medical bay was already configured for refugee operations. Triage stations stood ready to process thousands of patients, while surgical suites waited in standby mode. Bioprinters hummed quietly, their feedstock tanks full and ready to manufacture whatever medical supplies might be needed. It was a symphony of preparedness, a testament to human dedication to preserving life. Dr. Chen, report to communications, came the ship-wide announcement. Dr. Chen to communications. Sarah made her way to the communication center, where she found communications officer Rachel Kim hunched over her console with a puzzled expression. Doctor, I'm receiving some unusual transmissions from the refugee fleet, Kim explained. Most of it is standard emergency broadcasts, requests for medical assistance, coordination chatter. But there are other signals mixed in, coded transmissions on military frequencies. Sarah leaned over Kim's shoulder to look at the display. The refugee fleet was enormous, thousands of ships of every conceivable design, from massive passenger liners to tiny personal craft. Many were damaged, some barely holding together as they limped toward the safety of the Kepler system. Could be military units that evacuated with the civilians, Sarah suggested. Maybe they're coordinating with local defense forces. Maybe, Kim replied, but her tone suggested doubt. But some of these frequencies, they're not standard issue for any military I'm familiar with, and the encryption is sophisticated. More sophisticated than most military forces use for routine communications. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The light shifted to yellow alert status as Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the corridors. All hands, this is the captain. We've detected multiple drive signatures approaching our position. Unknown vessels are on an intercept course. All departments prepare for possible emergency procedures. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she rushed back toward the medical bay. This was it, their first real test. She had trained for emergency situations, had run countless simulations, but this was different. This was real people depending on them, real lives in the balance. The medical bay had transformed in the few minutes she'd been away. All non-essential staff had secured their stations, while the senior medical team took positions at the emergency response consoles. The atmosphere was tense but professional. These were people who had dedicated their lives to helping others, and they wouldn't be deterred by the first sign of trouble. Report called Dr. Fatigue Webb as Sarah took her position. Unknown vessels approaching, Sarah replied. No identification yet. The ship's intercom crackled to life again. This is Captain Rodriguez. The approaching vessels have been identified as Shadow Claw Syndicate raiders, confirmed pirates. They are broadcasting demands for our cargo and threatening to board. All departments maintain emergency readiness. A collective intake of breath went through the medical bay. The Shadow Claw Syndicate was notorious throughout the Outer Rim, a loose confederation of pirates and raiders who preyed on merchant vessels and refugee convoys. They were known for their brutality and their complete disregard for galactic law. Captain to medical bay, came Rodriguez's voice over the comm. Prepare for possible casualties. We are broadcasting our medical neutrality and protection under galactic conventions, but maintain readiness for emergency treatment. Dr. Webb moved to the center of the bay.
His voice carrying the calm authority that had guided him through countless crises.
Listen up, everyone. We're a hospital ship. We're protected under galactic law, and we're clearly marked as a medical vessel. The chances of these pirates actually attacking us are minimal. It would be a violation of every treaty and convention in known space. Despite Webb's reassuring words, Sarah could see the tension in everyone's faces. Pirates weren't exactly known for their respect for international law. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel, settling into a standard orbital approach toward the refugee fleet. Through the medical bay's viewports, Sarah could see the massive congregation of refugee vessels, a heartbreaking sight of displaced lives seeking safety and hope. All hands, prepare for incoming transmission, announced Rodriguez. The medical bay's display activated, showing a reptilian face with cold, predatory eyes. The being appeared to be Korthak, though its battle scarring in cybernetic implants marked it as something far removed from civilized society. Human vessel, the pirate leader hissed, its translated voice carrying an undertone of menace. You will surrender your cargo and medical supplies. Your vessel will be boarded for inspection. Comply immediately or face the consequences. Captain Rodriguez's response was immediate and firm. Shadow Claw vessel. This is the hospital ship Hippocrates, operating under the protection of the Geneva Conventions of 2157. We are a medical vessel on a humanitarian mission. Under galactic law, you cannot board or interfere with our operations. The pirate's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. Your human laws mean nothing here, medical ship. You carry valuable supplies, and we will have them. You have 5 minutes to prepare for boarding. The transmission ended, leaving the medical bay in stunned silence. Sarah felt her world shift as the reality of their situation sank in. They were alone, unarmed, and facing pirates who clearly had no intention of respecting their medical neutrality. Medical bay to bridge, Webb called out, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Captain, recommend we begin preparing for casualty reception. If they board us, there may be injuries. Understood, medical. Maintain stations and prepare for all contingencies. As the 5-minute deadline approached, Sarah found herself thinking about the oath she had taken when she became a doctor. To do no harm, to preserve life, to help those in need. She had never imagined the commitment might put her in danger, that the very act of trying to help could make her a target. The ship shuddered again, and Sarah realized the pirates were moving closer. Through the viewports, she could see the sleek, predatory shapes of the Shadowclaw vessels approaching. There were at least 6 of them, armed and dangerous, closing in on the defenseless medical ship. All hands, brace for contact, came Rodriguez's voice over the intercom. Shadowclaw vessels are beginning their approach. Maintain emergency protocols. Sarah gripped the edge of her medical station, her knuckles white with tension. Around her, the rest of the medical team prepared for the worst. Their faces set with determination despite their fear. They were doctors, nurses, healers, but they were also human. And that meant something the pirates were about to learn. The hypocrites might be unarmed, but she carried something more dangerous than any weapon. A crew that would fight with everything they had to protect the innocent. And a commitment to their mission that would not be broken by threats or violence. As the first pirate ship moved into boarding position, Sarah realized that their peaceful mission was about to become something very different. But whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. They would not abandon their duty, no matter the cost. The magnetic clamps of the pirate vessel sealed against the Hippocratic's hull with a metallic thud that echoed through the medical bay. Sarah felt her stomach drop as the reality of their situation fully hit her. In all her years of medical training, nothing had prepared her for this moment. The knowledge that violent beings were about to board their peaceful vessel. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom one final time before the boarding began. All hands, remember your training. We are medical personnel operating under the protection of galactic law. Comply with reasonable demands, protect your patients and colleagues, and document everything. Help is on the way. Sarah wondered what help the captain meant. They were days away from any military presence, surrounded by desperate refugees and predatory pirates. But there was something in Rodriguez's tone that suggested she knew something the rest of the crew didn't. The first pirates came through the airlock with weapons drawn, a mixed group of Korthak, Zelani, and what appeared to be rogue humans. Their leader was the same scarred reptilian who had made the demands, his cybernetic eye glowing red as he surveyed the ship's corridors. Behind him came a dozen heavily armed raiders, their weapons trained on the crew members who had gathered in the main corridor as ordered. "Where is your cargo bay?" the pirate leader demanded, his translated voice harsh and guttural. Chief Engineer Bradley stepped forward, his hands raised but his posture defiant. "This is a medical vessel. We carry medical supplies, nothing more." Under galactic law, the pirate's backhand caught Bradley across the face, sending the elder man stumbling. "I know what you carry, human. Bioprinters, surgical equipment, medical databases, all worth more than most ships. Where is it?" Dr. Webb moved to help Bradley, his medical training overriding his fear. "He needs treatment. Let me." "You will stay where you are," snarled another pirate. This one a heavily scarred human wearing the black and red colors of the Shadowclaw Syndicate. Nobody moves without permission. Sarah watched in growing horror as the pirates began systematically looting the ship. They moved with practiced efficiency, clearly having done this before. Some headed toward the cargo bays where the medical supplies were stored, while others spread throughout the ship searching for anything of value. "Medical bay," ordered the reptilian leader, pointing at Dr. Pallison. "Webb, show us everything." Webb glanced toward Captain Rodriguez, who nodded grimly. There was nothing they could do but comply and hope that the pirates would take what they wanted and leave. The alternative, resistance, would likely result in casualties they were helpless to prevent. As they were escorted toward the medical bay, Sarah noticed Communications Officer Kim frantically working at a portable console she had hidden behind a supply crate. The woman's fingers moved quickly across the interface, and Sarah realized she was trying to send some kind of message. The medical bay revealed its treasures to the pirates' greedy eyes. Bioprinters worth millions of credits, surgical equipment that could perform operations on dozens of different species, and medical computers containing treatment databases that represented decades of human medical advancement. To people who dedicated their lives to healing, these were tools of mercy. To the pirates, they were simply valuable cargo. "This will do nicely," the reptilian leader hissed, his cybernetic eye recording everything. "Begin removal procedures. I want everything loaded within the hour." "Please, Doctor." Webb stepped forward, his voice carefully controlled. "These supplies are meant for refugee camps. There are millions of displaced beings who need medical attention. If you take this equipment..." The pirate leader's claw caught Webb across the throat, slamming the older doctor against the bulkhead. "Their suffering is not my concern. Your merchandise is." Sarah felt rage building inside her chest, a hot fury that surprised her with its intensity. She had taken an oath to preserve life, but watching this monster threaten Dr. Webb, a man who had dedicated his entire life to helping others, made her want to fight back regardless of the consequences. Other crew members were having similar reactions. She could see the tension building in Chief Bradley's shoulders, the way Dr. Carl and Nat Park's hands clenched and unclenched, the barely controlled anger in Captain Rodriguez's eyes. The pirates might have weapons and numbers, but they had made one crucial error. They had attacked people whose entire purpose in life was protecting others. The looting continued for 20 minutes, with pirates hauling away medical equipment worth tens of millions of credits. But Sarah noticed something the raiders seemed to have missed. Communications Officer Kim was still working at her hidden console, and she was smiling. "Signal sent," Kim whispered to Captain Rodriguez when one of the pirates moved out of earshot. "Full emergency broadcast, including our location and situation." Rodriguez nodded almost imperceptibly. "How long? Hard to say. But they'll know what happened here." Sarah wondered who they were,
But before she could ask, the situation took a turn for the worse. One of the pirate crew, a young Zeleny who couldn't have been more than 20, was examining a bioprinter when something went wrong.
Whether through incompetence or accident, the machine's containment field destabilized, releasing a cloud of toxic synthesis chemicals into the air. The young Zeleny immediately began convulsing, his respiratory system shutting down as the chemicals burned through his lungs. Within seconds, he collapsed, gasping and choking as his companions stared in shock. Without thinking, Dr. Vaya, Sarah Chen rushed forward. "Stop!" the reptilian leader roared, swinging his weapon toward her. "Stay back. He's dying," Sarah snapped, her medical training overriding every other consideration. "If you don't let me treat him, he'll be dead in 3 minutes." The pirate leader's cybernetic eye focused on his fallen comrade. Calculating. The young Zeleny was clearly important to him. Sarah could see it in the way the other pirates looked between their leader and the dying youth. "Help him," the reptilian finally snarled. "But any tricks and I kill you all." Sarah dropped to her knees beside the dying pirate, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Chemical burns in the respiratory system. She had treated similar cases during her residency. She needed neutralizing agents, respiratory support, and cellular regeneration therapy. "I need equipment," she said without looking up at the pirate leader. "Medical kit from Storage Locker 7, emergency respiratory unit, and access to the bioprinter's pharmaceutical synthesizer." The pirate leader barked orders in his own language, and several raiders rushed to comply. Even in their greed and violence, they weren't willing to watch their comrade die when help was available. As Sarah worked to stabilize the dying Zeleny, she became aware of a strange quiet that had fallen over the medical bay. The other pirates watched her with something approaching awe as she fought to save a life, the life of someone who had come to rob and possibly kill them. The treatment took 45 minutes. Sarah worked with the intensity she had learned during her trauma rotation, using every piece of medical knowledge she possessed. Gradually, the young Zelany's breathing stabilized, his vital signs improved, and the worst of the chemical damage was neutralized. "He'll live," Sarah finally announced, sitting back on her heels. "But he needs continued treatment for the next several hours. The regeneration therapy has to run its full course, or the lung damage will be permanent." The reptilian leader stared at her for a long moment, his cybernetic eye whirring as it refocused. "You saved him. Why?" Sarah looked up at the monster who had threatened her crew and stolen their medical supplies. "Because that's what doctors do. We save lives. All lives." Something shifted in the pirate's expression. For just a moment, the predatory coldness was replaced by something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Confusion, perhaps, or even a hint of shame. The moment was broken by the arrival of another pirate, this one carrying Sarah's portable medical scanner. As she worked to monitor her patient's recovery, the scanner picked up something unexpected. "Captain," Sarah called out, her voice carefully controlled. "I'm reading multiple drive signatures approaching our position. Large ones." The pirate leader spun toward her, his weapon raised. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Captain Rodriguez replied, but there was something in her voice that made Sarah look at her more closely. "We are a medical vessel. We don't have weapons or military contacts." The reptilian's cybernetic eye was flashing rapidly as he received updates from his own crew. "My ships report 12 contacts approaching at high speed. Military signatures. How is this possible?" Communications Officer Kim chose that moment to speak up, her voice carrying a tone of grim satisfaction. "Because you made a mistake. You attacked a human medical vessel." The pirate leader's attention snapped to her. "What are you talking about?" Kim smiled, and Sarah realized the young officer wasn't afraid anymore. Every human medical ship carries an emergency beacon. When we're attacked, that beacon sends a priority signal across the entire human communication network. Every human ship, station, and colony receives it instantly. The reptilian's cybernetic eye was flashing faster now. "So? Your military is days away." "Our military? Yes," Kim agreed. "But you forgot something. Humans don't just serve in the military anymore. We're engineers, doctors, merchants, researchers. We're scattered across the galaxy, and we all have ships." As if to punctuate her words, the ship's proximity alarms began sounding. Sarah moved to a viewport and felt her breath catch in her throat. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel all around them, not military vessels, but civilian craft of every conceivable design. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, survey ships, mining barges, even a few luxury yachts, all bearing the distinctive blue and white markings that identified them as human vessels. "What is this?" the pirate leader demanded, his composure finally cracking. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, and for the first time since the boarding began, she was smiling. This is what happens when you attack a human medical ship.
You see, we may have given up our military fleets, but we never gave up looking after our own. The communication panel crackled to life with dozens of voices speaking in unison. Hospital ship Hippocrates, this is the merchant vessel Golden Horizon. We received your distress call. Hippocrates, this is the survey ship Deep Explorer, standing by to assist. Medical vessel, this is the passenger liner Starwood Dream. We have security personnel and medical facilities standing by. Hippocrates, this is the cargo hauler Heavy Lifter. We're not armed, but we're not leaving. The voices continued, ship after ship announcing their presence. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. An entire improvised fleet of civilian vessels, drawn together by nothing more than the knowledge that fellow humans needed help. The pirate leader's cybernetic eye was flashing red now as he received increasingly frantic reports from his own ships. They're surrounding us. There are dozens of them. My captains are requesting orders. Tell them to surrender, suggested Captain Rodriguez pleasantly. They're outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded by very angry humans who don't appreciate pirates attacking medical ships. Sarah looked out at the growing fleet of civilian vessels and felt something she had never experienced before, a deep, overwhelming pride in her species. These weren't soldiers or warriors, just ordinary people who had heard that humans were in trouble and had dropped everything to help. The young Zalani Sarah had saved was beginning to regain consciousness. His eyes opened, focusing on her face with confusion and growing awareness. When he realized what had happened, that she had saved his life despite what he had done, tears began streaming down his scaled cheeks. "Why?" he whispered in heavily accented standard. "Why save me?" Sarah looked down at the young pirate, then around at her crew, and finally out at the fleet of human ships that had come to their aid. "Because that's who we are," she said simply. "That's who we've always been." The reptilian leader was screaming orders into his communicator, but Sarah could hear the panic in his voice. His raiding party had expected to find a helpless medical ship full of valuable cargo. Instead, they had discovered something far more dangerous. Humans who would risk everything to protect their own, and who never, ever, forgot an attack on those who couldn't defend themselves. The hypocrites might be unarmed, but she was no longer alone. And Sarah was beginning to understand that sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't a gun or a missile. It was the unbreakable bond between people who refused to abandon each other, no matter the cost. The standoff lasted exactly 14 minutes. Sarah watched through the medical bay viewport as the improvised human fleet maneuvered around the pirate vessels with a precision that defied their civilian origins. The cargo haulers and passenger liners might not have been military ships, but their crews included veterans, security personnel, and people who had grown up watching their species transform from warriors to healers without ever forgetting how to protect what they loved. "Hippocrates, this is Commander Elizabeth Santos aboard the passenger liner New Geneva," came a crisp voice over the communications channel. "I'm a retired Navy tactical officer. The civilian fleet is requesting permission to coordinate response." Captain Rodriguez exchanged a look with the reptilian pirate leader, whose cybernetic eye was flashing rapidly as he processed the deteriorating situation. "Commander Santos, this is Captain Rodriguez. We have 12 pirates aboard our vessel, and they're holding my crew at gunpoint." "Understood, Hippocrates. Recommend pirates be advised of their current tactical situation." The pirate leader snarled something in his own language before switching to standard. "What tactical situation?" "These are civilian ships." Commander Santos's voice carried the cold professionalism of someone who had spent decades in combat. "Shadow Claw vessels. You are surrounded by 43 human ships. While we are civilian vessels, our combined crews include 237 former military personnel, 46 licensed security officers, and 81 individuals with combat engineering experience." Sarah could see the pirate leader's confidence evaporating as the numbers sank in. Santos continued, "Additionally, several of our vessels carry industrial mining charges, construction demolition equipment, and fabrication tools that can be repurposed as weapons. You are outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded. Surrender immediately." The young Zalani pirate Sarah had treated was now fully conscious and listening to the exchange with growing horror. He whispered something to the reptilian leader in their shared language, words that made the older pirate's expression darken. "What did he say?" Dr. Webb asked quietly. The reptilian leader's translator caught the question and provided an answer that sent chills through the medical bay. He said, "These humans are different." He said they're not just angry, they're cold angry, the dangerous kind. Sarah realized the young pirate was right. The voices coming over the communication channels weren't filled with rage or panic. They were calm, professional, and utterly implacable. The civilian fleet wasn't responding with emotion. They were responding with the methodical precision of people who had made a calculated decision about justice. "All ships! This is the merchant Captain David Kim aboard the Prosperity," announced another voice.
"I'm tracking 6 Shadowclaw vessels attempting to withdraw from the engagement zone. Recommend intercept courses to prevent escape."
"Roger that, Prosperity. Survey ship Deep Explorer, adjusting course to block exit Vector Alpha.
Cargo hauler Iron Mountain moving to intercept Vector Beta. Mining barge Asteroid Queen deploying industrial tractors to prevent FTL jump." Sarah watched in fascination as the civilian ships moved with growing coordination. They might not have been purpose-built warships, but they were operated by humans who understood logistics, engineering, and tactical thinking. More importantly, they were operated by people who had received word that someone had attacked a human medical ship, and that was simply unacceptable. The pirate leader was speaking rapidly into his communicator, but Sarah could see the desperation in his movements. His cybernetic eye was flashing red, indicating extreme stress, and his scaled hands were trembling slightly. "My ships cannot break free," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your people have trapped us." "Not our people," corrected Captain Rodriguez. "Just humans who heard that other humans needed help." The concept seemed to baffle the reptilian pirate. "But there is no profit in this, no territory to gain. Why would they risk themselves for strangers?" Dr. Sarah Chen looked down at the young Zelani pirate she had saved, then back up at his leader. "Because that's what we do. When humans are threatened, other humans respond. It doesn't matter if we know them personally. It doesn't matter if there's profit involved. We protect our own." "This is impossible," the pirate leader muttered. "No species behaves this way. No species sacrifices for strangers." "You're wrong," said Chief Engineer Bradley, wiping blood from his split lip with a defiant grin. "And that's why you're about to learn why humans gave up building warships. We didn't need them anymore. We had something better." The communication channels crackled with a new voice. Older, carrying an authority that made even the pirates pause. "Shadowclaw vessels. This is Admiral Marcus Thompson, retired, aboard the luxury yacht Second Wind. I'm taking operational command of the civilian fleet." Sarah felt her eyes widen. Admiral Thompson was a legend, the man who had commanded Earth's last battle fleet before the Great Disarmament. He was supposed to be enjoying retirement on a pleasure cruise somewhere in the inner systems. Admiral Thompson. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried surprised respect. "Sir, what are you doing out here?" Thompson's chuckle was audible across the channel. "My wife insisted we take a second honeymoon to the Centauri resorts. Lucky for you, we were only 2 systems away when we received your distress call." His voice hardened. "Shadowclaw vessels, you will surrender immediately. You have attacked a protected medical vessel and threatened civilian personnel. There will be consequences." The reptilian pirate leader's cybernetic eye was now flashing so rapidly it looked like a strobe light. "What consequences?" "You're civilians. You have no authority here." "Wrong again," Admiral Thompson replied calmly. "Under the emergency response provisions of the Human Colonial Charter, any senior military officer may assume command of civilian vessels during humanitarian crises. As of this moment, I am commanding a fleet of 43 ships with combined crews of over 2,000 individuals. Surrender now, or face the consequences of your actions." Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. An entire species had transformed itself from warriors to healers. But when their healers were threatened, those same people had the capacity to instantly transform back into something far more dangerous than any military force. Protectors driven by absolute moral certainty. The young Zelani pirate was weeping openly now. "Please," he whispered to Sarah. "You saved my life. Can you save theirs too?" Sarah looked at the young being she had treated, then at his terrified comrades, and finally at her own crew. These pirates had attacked them, stolen their medical supplies, and threatened their lives. But they were also frightened beings, who had probably never encountered anything like the response their actions had triggered.
"Captain," Sarah said quietly. "Permission to speak with Admiral Thompson." Rodriguez nodded, and Sarah activated the communication panel.
"Admiral Thompson, sir, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, aboard the Hippocrates." "Go ahead, Doctor." "Sir, I've been treating one of the pirate crew members. He's young, probably forced into this life by circumstances beyond his control. If we could arrange some kind of surrender that doesn't end with bloodshed." There was a long pause before Thompson replied.
Doctor, these beings attacked a hospital ship. They threatened medical personnel and stole supplies meant for refugee populations. The appropriate response under galactic law would be summary execution. Sarah felt her heart sink, but Thompson wasn't finished. However, the Admiral continued, you've reminded me of something important. We're not just here to punish, we're here to protect. If the pirate crew surrenders unconditionally and returns all stolen medical equipment, I'm willing to accept their surrender and transfer them to proper authorities for trial. The reptilian pirate leader looked around the medical bay, taking in the faces of the humans he had threatened and robbed. For the first time since boarding, he seemed to truly understand what he was facing. Not just superior numbers, but an entire species that would cross the galaxy to protect 12 doctors on a medical mission. What guarantee do we have? He asked finally. The word of humans. Captain Rodriguez replied simply. We don't torture prisoners, we don't execute surrendering enemies, and we don't break our promises. But we also don't forget attacks on medical personnel. The pirate leader's cybernetic eye finally stopped flashing. With obvious reluctance, he lowered his weapon and spoke into his communicator in his own language. Sarah didn't need a translator to understand. He was ordering his ships to surrender. All Shadow Claw vessels, came his voice over the general channel, stand down, return stolen property. Prepare to surrender. The response was immediate. Admiral Thompson's voice carried satisfaction mixed with grim professionalism. All civilian vessels maintained positions, prepared to receive prisoners and recovered property. As the pirates began the process of returning the stolen medical equipment, Sarah found herself thinking about what she had witnessed. The galaxy knew humans as healers and builders, gentle beings who had chosen medicine over warfare. But they had forgotten something crucial. Humans hadn't given up the capacity for violence. They had simply chosen to reserve it for those who threatened the innocent. The young Zalani pirate approached her as his comrades carried the bioprinter back into the medical bay. Doctor, he said quietly, what will happen to us? Sarah considered the question carefully. You'll be tried for piracy under galactic law, but you'll also receive fair treatment and legal representation. The human legal system believes in justice, not revenge. And after? He asked. If we survive the trial, then you'll have a choice, Sarah replied. You can return to piracy and eventually face someone like Admiral Thompson again, or you can choose a different path. The young being looked around the medical bay with its life-saving equipment and dedicated personnel. What other path? Any path you want, Sarah said simply. That's what humans fight for. The right for everyone to choose their own destiny, free from those who would prey on the weak. As the last of the medical equipment was returned and the pirates prepared for transfer to the civilian fleet, Sarah realized something profound had happened. The galaxy had learned something new about humanity today. They were still the same species that had once built vast fleets and fought terrible wars. They had simply chosen to use that same ferocity to protect rather than conquer. The Hippocrates might be a medical ship, but she represented something far more powerful than any weapon. The unshakable commitment of an entire species to stand together in defense of those who dedicated their lives to helping others. And somewhere in the depths of space, automated communication relays were carrying news of what had happened here to every corner of human space. The message was simple but unmistakable. Attack our healers and face the consequences. Humanity had chosen peace, but they had never chosen to be helpless. The galaxy would remember the Clinicat ship incident. Not as a victory of violence over peace, but as proof that sometimes the most peaceful beings were also the most dangerous when their fundamental values were threatened. Admiral Thompson's final transmission summed it up perfectly. Let this be a lesson to anyone listening. Humans have chosen to be healers, builders, and protectors. But we will always be humans first, and humans protect their own. 3 days after the surrender, the true scope of what had happened began to reveal itself. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the Refugee Processing Center on Kepler Station, watching as the Hippocrates medical team worked alongside doctors from a dozen different species to treat the endless stream of displaced beings from the Zalani system. The pirates had been transferred to proper authorities, the stolen medical equipment had been returned, and their original mission had resumed. But nothing was the same. Dr. Chen, called Commander Elizabeth Santos, who had remained in the system aboard the New Geneva to coordinate the ongoing humanitarian efforts. Could we speak privately? Sarah excused herself from the triage station where she had been treating a family of Rex refugees and followed Santos to a quiet observation deck overlooking the massive refugee camps that had been established on the station's lower levels. I wanted to thank you, Santos said without preamble.
Your decision to treat that young pirate probably saved dozens of lives. Sarah looked confused. I don't understand. Santos gestured toward the viewport where the refugee fleet continued to arrive, thousands of ships carrying millions of displaced beings seeking safety. After word of the pirate attack spread, the refugee convoy was targeted by 2 more Shadowclaw raiding groups. They thought they'd found easy prey.
What happened?
They encountered the human civilian fleet that had stayed to escort the refugees to safety, Santos explained with grim satisfaction. 43 civilian ships had become 78 within 6 hours, with more arriving every day. The pirates took one look at the escort and decided to find easier targets. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. The refugees are safe because humans stayed to protect them. More than that, Santos continued, the Galactic news networks picked up the story. Human medical ship attacked, entire civilian fleet responds. It's the lead story on every major outlet across known space. Through the observation deck's communication panel, they could hear news broadcasts from a dozen different systems. Unprecedented response by human civilian vessels to attack on medical ship demonstrates species-wide commitment to humanitarian principles. Capture. 43 ships responded within hours to distress call from hospital vessel, successfully repelling pirate attack without firing a single shot. Galactic legal experts calling for review of current protection protocols for medical vessels following human demonstration of effective civilian response. Santos switched off the feeds and turned to Sarah. Do you understand what this means? For 60 years, the galaxy has seen humans as peaceful healers who gave up warfare. Today, they learned something different. What did they learn? That humans didn't give up the capacity for war. We just chose to use it differently. We don't conquer worlds anymore, but we'll cross the galaxy to protect a single medical ship. We don't build battle fleets, but we'll turn every civilian vessel into an escort if necessary. As if to prove her point, the observation deck's proximity sensors chimed with the arrival of another ship. Through the viewport, Sarah could see a sleek vessel bearing the distinctive markings of the Centauri Medical Corps, but this wasn't one of their usual transports. That's the CMC battlecruiser Asclepius, Santos noted with interest. Apparently the Centaurians were so impressed by our civilian response that they've dispatched their only medical warship to assist with refugee operations. Sarah stared at the approaching vessel. The Asclepius was a legendary ship, one of only a handful of vessels in the galaxy specifically designed to provide medical assistance in war zones. It carried enough firepower to protect itself from any threat, while simultaneously serving as a mobile hospital capable of treating thousands of patients. They're not the only ones, Santos continued. The Altarian Federation has dispatched 3 hospital ships with military escorts. The Rigel Consortium is sending a full medical fleet. Even the normally isolationist Vegan Union has announced they're contributing supplies and personnel. Because of what happened here? Because of how humans responded to what happened here, Santos corrected. The galaxy just learned that attacking human medical personnel doesn't just anger humans, it triggers a response that makes everyone safer. A communication request chimed on Santos's personal device. Santos here. Commander, this is Admiral Thompson aboard the Second Wind. Could you and Dr. Chen join me for a briefing? There's something you both need to see. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself aboard the luxury yacht that had become the command center for the improvised civilian fleet. The Second Wind might have been designed for pleasure cruises, but its main salon had been converted into a tactical center that would have been at home on any military vessel. Admiral Thompson looked every bit the legend Sarah had heard about. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone who had commanded fleets in combat. But there was something else in his expression, something that suggested he was seeing possibilities that others had missed. Ladies, he began, gesturing toward a holographic display that showed the entire Kepler system. I want to show you something remarkable. The display activated, revealing the positions of hundreds of ships throughout the system. The refugee fleet was clustered around Kepler Station, but they were surrounded by a protective perimeter of vessels from dozens of different species, all inspired by the human response to the pirate attack. 3 days ago, this was a refugee crisis spiraling out of control, Thompson explained. Pirates were preying on civilian convoys, local authorities were overwhelmed, and millions of beings were trapped in limbo with no hope of assistance. The display shifted, showing the before and after positions of various fleets. Today, this system has become the most secure location in the Outer Rim. 14 different species have contributed ships and personnel. The Shadowclaw Syndicate has withdrawn from the entire sector, and refugee processing has accelerated by 400%.
Sarah studied the display, trying to understand the full implications. You're saying the attack on our ship led to all this? Not the attack, Thompson corrected. The response to the attack. The galaxy just learned what happens when you threaten something humans care about. But more importantly, they learned that the human definition of something we care about includes any innocent being seeking help. Commander Santos leaned forward. Admiral, what are you getting at? Thompson's expression grew serious. I've been in contact with Earth Central Command. They're asking me to consider something unprecedented. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing star charts of the entire Outer Rim region. Dozens of systems were marked in red, areas where piracy, conflict, and humanitarian crises were ongoing problems. Command is wondering if what happened here could be replicated, Thompson continued. Not through military intervention, but through coordinated civilian response. Merchant fleets, passenger liners, survey ships, all working together to ensure that medical vessels, refugee convoys, and humanitarian missions are protected. Sarah felt her breath catch. You're talking about turning the entire human civilian fleet into a defensive network. I'm talking about formalizing something that already exists, Thompson replied. What happened here wasn't planned or coordinated by any government. It was a spontaneous response by individual humans who heard that other humans needed help. The infrastructure for this kind of response already exists. We just need to make it official. Santos was studying the star charts with growing excitement. The Outer Rim colonies have been struggling with piracy and raiding for decades. Local defense forces are overwhelmed, and military intervention is too expensive and slow. But a rapid civilian response network could provide protection without militarization. Thompson finished. Civilian vessels aren't a threat to anyone until they need to be. The Admiral activated another display showing communication logs from across human space. In the past 72 hours, I've received over 2,000 messages from civilian ship captains volunteering for something exactly like this. They want to know how they can help ensure that what happened to the Hippocrates never happens again. Sarah found herself thinking about the young Zelani pirates she had treated. What about the pirates themselves? Some of them are probably just beings trapped by circumstances. That's where the medical component becomes crucial, Thompson replied. Every rapid response fleet would include medical ships like the Hippocrates, not just to treat victims, but to provide alternatives to beings who turn to piracy out of desperation. The concept was staggering in its implications. Sarah realized they were discussing the potential transformation of human space from a loose confederation of colonies into something approaching a mutual protection network, but one based on healing rather than warfare. There's something else, Thompson continued, his expression growing even more serious. The Korthak Hegemony and the Vrex Collective have both requested meetings with Earth diplomats. About what? About potentially joining the civilian protection network. They've seen what happened here, and they want to know if the same kind of rapid response could protect their own medical ships and refugee operations. Sarah stared at the Admiral in shock. They want to join a human-led humanitarian alliance? They want to join a humanitarian alliance that works, Thompson corrected. The traditional approach, formal military treaties and complex diplomatic protocols, has failed to protect civilian vessels and medical missions. The human approach, immediate civilian response backed by overwhelming moral authority, has succeeded spectacularly. Commander Santos was shaking her head in amazement. If this works, if we can actually formalize this kind of rapid response network, then humans will have achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, Thompson finished. We'll have created a military force that exists solely to protect the innocent, staffed by volunteers, and commanded by moral authority rather than political power. Through the yacht's viewports, Sarah could see the ongoing refugee operations. Thousands of beings receiving medical treatment, food, shelter, and hope because a single medical ship had been attacked and the galaxy had learned what happened when humans protected their own. What's the next step? She asked. Admiral Thompson smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like the retired officer he was supposed to be rather than the fleet commander he had become. The next step is up to people like you, Dr. Docker. Chen. Earth Command can provide coordination and logistics, but this has to remain what it started as. A civilian initiative. We need doctors, engineers, pilots, and ordinary people who are willing to drop everything when innocent beings need protection. Sarah thought about her oath as a physician, about the young pirate she had saved, about the millions of refugees who would receive help because humans had refused to let an attack on a medical ship go unanswered. The choice was obvious. When do we start? Thompson's smile widened. We already have. Every ship in this system is now part of the network. Every captain who responded to the Hippocrates distress call is now a founding member of what historians will probably call the Human Humanitarian Response Fleet. And if other species want to join, then we'll teach them what we learned here, Thompson replied. That the most powerful force in the galaxy isn't the ability to destroy, but the willingness to protect. That civilians can be more dangerous than soldiers when they're fighting for something they truly believe in. And that sometimes the best way to keep the peace is to make sure everyone understands the consequences of breaking it. As Sarah looked out at the growing fleet of ships from dozens of different species, all working together to help beings in need, she realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. Humanity had found a way to combine their healing nature with their protective instincts, creating something that was neither military nor civilian, but somehow more powerful than either. The clinic ship incident had ended with the capture of some pirates and the protection of a refugee fleet, but it had also started something far more significant: the transformation of human space into a network of protectors who would ensure that no medical ship would ever face attack alone again. And somewhere in the depths of space, communication networks were carrying word of what had happened to every corner of known space. The message was spreading. Humans protect their healers, and increasingly, they consider everyone in need of healing to be under their protection. 6 months after the clinic ship incident, Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Kepler Station Medical Center, watching ships arrive and depart in a carefully coordinated dance that had become the model for humanitarian operations across the galaxy. The refugee crisis that had brought the Hippocrates to this system was now a memory. Nearly 4 million displaced beings had been successfully resettled, treated for their injuries and trauma, and given new hope for their futures. But more importantly, the response to that crisis had fundamentally changed how the galaxy approached humanitarian protection. Dr. Chen called Admiral Thompson, who had formerly come out of retirement to command what was now officially known as the Humanitarian Response Network. The Earth Council representatives have arrived for the anniversary ceremony. Sarah turned from the viewport to see a small group of distinguished individuals approaching across the station's main concourse. She recognized several faces from news broadcasts: the Secretary General of the United Earth Council, the Director of the Galactic Medical Corps, and representatives from nearly a dozen different species that had joined the HRN in the months following the incident. Secretary General Davidson, Admiral Thompson said formally, "Welcome to Kepler Station." Davidson, a stern woman who had guided Earth's diplomatic efforts for over a decade, looked around the bustling medical center with obvious satisfaction. "Admiral Dr. Chen, I have to admit, when we first received your proposal for the Humanitarian Response Network, many of us thought you were being overly optimistic." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now we're trying to figure out how to expand it fast enough to meet demand," Davidson replied with a slight smile. "In 6 months, the HRN has responded to 47 humanitarian crises across 17 systems. Piracy in the Outer Rim territories has dropped by 78%, and 14 different species have requested formal membership in the network." Sarah found herself thinking about how much had changed since that terrifying day when pirates had boarded the Hippocrates. The ship herself was now the flagship of HRN Medical Division. Her crew expanded and her mission broadened, but still fundamentally the same: healing those who needed help. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," Admiral Thompson said, gesturing toward a young Zelani approaching from the medical bay entrance. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the former pirate she had treated during the incident. But the transformation was remarkable. Gone were the crude weapons and ragged clothing of a raider, replaced by the clean uniform and confident bearing of a medical technician. "Dr. Chen," the young Zelani said, his standard much improved but still carrying traces of his accent. "I hoped I would see you again." "Kef," Sarah replied, remembering his name with a smile. "I heard you've been accepted into the medical training program. How are you finding it?" Kef's expression grew serious. "Difficult, but rewarding. I'm learning that healing is much harder than hurting, but also much more satisfying." He paused, then continued with obvious emotion. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for saving my life, but for showing me that there was another path." Secretary General Davidson looked confused. "I'm sorry, but who is this?" "Keth was one of the pirates who attacked the Hippocrates," Admiral Thompson explained matter-of-factly. "Dr. Naisha. Chen saved his life during the incident. He's now training to become a medical technician with the HRN." Davidson's eyebrows rose. "You're training former pirates to become medical personnel?"
"We're training anyone who wants to help,"
Sarah corrected gently. Keth's background gives him unique insights into the desperation that drives beings to piracy. He's been invaluable in designing our outreach programs for at-risk populations.
Keth nodded enthusiastically. Many beings turn to raiding because they see no other choices. The HRN shows them different options: medical training, engineering education, even ship crew positions. It is much harder to recruit pirates when their potential victims are offering them jobs instead. Admiral Thompson activated a holographic display showing the current status of the HRN network. The map revealed an intricate web of civilian vessels, medical ships, and rapid response centers spread across dozens of systems. Each node in the network was color-coded to show its status and capabilities. As of this morning, Thompson announced, the Humanitarian Response Network consists of 2,347 vessels from 19 different species. We have medical ships, engineering support vessels, security escorts, and logistics coordinators. More importantly, we have something that no traditional military force has ever possessed: absolute moral authority. The holographic display shifted to show recent response times to various crises. The numbers were impressive. Average response time to humanitarian emergencies had dropped from days to hours, while the mere existence of the network had deterred countless potential attacks on civilian vessels. But the most significant change isn't in the numbers, Thompson continued. It's in the fundamental shift in how the galaxy approaches security. Instead of building bigger weapons to deter attacks, species are joining the network to ensure rapid response when attacks occur. Secretary General Davidson studied the display with obvious interest. Admiral, the Earth Council has been receiving requests from several major powers to formalize Earth's role in the network. The Centauri Federation, in particular, is interested in expanding joint operations. With respect, Secretary General, Sarah interjected, I think you're missing the point. The HRN works precisely because it isn't formal. It's not a government program or a military alliance. It's a voluntary association of beings who believe that protecting innocent life is more important than politics or profit. Thompson nodded approvingly. Doctor, Chen is correct. The moment we turn this into a formal governmental structure, we lose what makes it effective. The response to the hypocrites worked because it was spontaneous, moral, and immediate. Bureaucracy would kill that. As if to prove the point, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not emergency alerts, but the coordinated tones that indicated an HRN response was being activated. Through the observation deck speakers came the familiar voice of the network's central coordinator. All HRN vessels, priority response requested. Medical emergency in the Tau Ceti system. Passenger liner Starlight Express reports engine failure and toxic gas leak. 2,000 passengers require immediate evacuation and medical assistance. Sarah watched the holographic display update in real time as ships throughout the network began responding. The Hippocrates immediately adjusted course, while 3 nearby cargo haulers prepared to assist with passenger evacuation. A Centauri medical cruiser diverted from its routine patrol, and even a Regelian survey ship offered its engineering expertise. Within minutes, a coordinated response was underway, not because any government had ordered it, but because the beings manning those ships had committed to protecting innocent life wherever they found it. Response time, 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Admiral Thompson noted with satisfaction. Estimated arrival at Tau Ceti, 7 hours, 12 minutes. The passengers of the Starlight Express will receive help faster than any traditional rescue service could provide. Davidson shook her head in amazement. In my 40 years in government, I've never seen anything like this. How do you coordinate such a complex operation without central authority? The same way humans coordinated the response to the hypocrites, Sarah replied. Shared values, clear communication, and the understanding that protecting innocent life takes priority over everything else.
Keth had been listening to the exchange with growing excitement. Dr. Rock called Benny a brick.
Chen, could I volunteer for the Tau Ceti response? I have experience with toxic gas injuries from my time before. Sarah looked at the young being who had once been part of a pirate crew and now wanted to help save lives. You'll need to coordinate with the Hippocrates medical team, but, yes, your experience could be invaluable. As Keth hurried off to join the response team, Secretary General Davidson turned to Admiral Thompson. Admiral, I have to ask, what happens when the HRN encounters a threat it can't handle? What happens when someone with military-grade weapons decides to challenge the network? Thompson's expression grew serious. That's already happened, Secretary General. 3 months ago, a Korthak battle group attempted to raid the Haran medical convoy in the Vega system. What was the outcome?
The battle group found itself facing 230 civilian vessels, including 17 ships carrying former military personnel and 49 vessels equipped with industrial equipment that could be weaponized. The Korthak commander took one look at the odds and requested permission to surrender. Sarah remembered that incident well. The HRN's response had been swift and overwhelming, but more importantly, it had been decisive proof that the network's philosophy of protection through moral authority was not the same thing as pacifism. The galaxy has learned something important. Thompson continued. The HRN won't start fights, but it will finish them. And because our response is so overwhelming and so obviously justified, potential aggressors have to consider whether their goal is worth facing the combined wrath of every decent being in known space. The observation deck's communication panel chimed with an incoming transmission. Kepler Station, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Hippocrates. We're approaching the Tau Ceti system and can see the Starlight Express. Initial scans show the situation is manageable with current resources. Estimate full evacuation and medical treatment within 12 hours. Acknowledged, Hippocrates, Thompson replied. All HRN vessels, excellent response time. Another successful mission. As the communication ended, Sarah found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. The attack on the Hippocrates had been intended to steal medical supplies and prey on helpless beings. Instead, it had triggered the creation of the most effective humanitarian protection network in galactic history. Dr. Chen, Secretary General Davidson said quietly, I have one more question. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the pirates hadn't attacked your ship? Sarah considered the question carefully. I think they would have attacked someone else's ship eventually. And when they did, they would have faced the same response. The HRN didn't start with the Hippocrates incident. It started with the fundamental human belief that protecting innocent life is worth any sacrifice. And the future? Davidson asked. What happens next? Admiral Thompson gestured towards the viewport, where ships from a dozen different species could be seen working together in perfect coordination. The future is what we're building right now. A galaxy where medical ships don't travel alone, where refugee convoys have protection, where pirates and raiders know that attacking innocent beings will bring swift and overwhelming justice. Sarah watched a group of Centauri medical students working alongside human engineers and Rigelian technicians to load supplies for another humanitarian mission. The sight filled her with a sense of pride and hope that she had never experienced before. The clinic ship incident taught the galaxy something important, she said finally. It taught them that humans didn't give up the capacity for war when we chose to become healers. We just decided to reserve that capacity for protecting the things we hold most sacred: life, health, and the fundamental right of all beings to live without fear. As if to punctuate her words, another ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel and approached the station. This one bearing the distinctive markings of the Vegan Union, traditionally one of the most isolationist species in known space. Kepler Station, this is the vegan medical vessel Compassion, came a transmission. We request permission to join HRN operations. Admiral Thompson smiled as he approved the docking request. Dr. Chen, I think that answers your question about the future. The galaxy is learning what humans discovered long ago, that the greatest strength isn't the ability to conquer, but the willingness to protect. 6 months after 12 doctors and nurses on a medical mission had been attacked by pirates, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The Humanitarian Response Network now represented the largest voluntary association of beings in known space, united by a single principle that transcended species, politics, and self-interest. The clinic ship incident had ended with the capture of some pirates and the rescue of some refugees, but it had started something far more significant: the transformation of an entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly powerful. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that humans had always known. The most dangerous enemy in the universe wasn't the one with the biggest weapons or the strongest army. It was the one who would risk everything to protect the innocent and who never ever forgot an attack on those who couldn't defend themselves. The Hippocrates still carried her original mission statement painted on her hull: to heal, to help, to hope. But now it carried an addition that had been suggested by Keth, the former pirate who had become one of her most dedicated crew members, and to protect those who do the same. That, Sarah reflected as she watched the continuing work of the station around her, was perhaps the most human thing of all, turning an act of violence into an opportunity to make the galaxy a better place for everyone.